Terrific. Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for our webinar today, Strategies to Leverage Donor-Advised Fund Philanthropy. And my name is Nathan Stelter, president here at the Stelter Company, and happy to be here to introduce our presenter today. But before I do, I'd like to say a couple quick words in regards to the webinar series. Many of you are familiar with the Stelter webinar series, and as an industry leader in plain giving, we're committed to providing innovative solutions and education for the industry. Always happy to host and have for quite a few years this complimentary webinar series, as well as a whole slate of webinars throughout the year. This year we've had some terrific speakers, Catherine Myrie, Pamela Davidson, and others. This is actually our 9th of our 2020 curriculum. All that, as Jen mentioned, can be found on stelter.com/webinars. A couple other presentations coming up later this year are Johnny Hayes from Thompson Associates, the newly 2020 Distinguished Service Award winner from CGP, as well as the infamous Russell James, our good friend, talking about most recent observations on baby boomers. And you can register for all of those on our website at stelter.com/webinars. But want to get to Claire as quickly as I can. I know, as Jen mentioned, there's a lot of content to cover and obviously a ton of interest. We had over 1,000 folks sign up for the presentation today, with donor-advised funds being such a critical way for us to raise money and do the good work we do. Obviously, for those speakers tonight on the call, you guys have the donor-advised fund widget that we've built out for you on your websites, as well as a lot of tools available. And Claire's here today to give you some great insight into things to be mindful of as you're pursuing these types of tools. Claire, who many of you hopefully have heard and seen, is a fundraising visionary with 30 years of frontline development work, helping organizations raise millions in support, working with nonprofits such as the San Francisco Food Bank, Jewish Family and Children's Services, Jewish Community Center, San Francisco Conservatory of Music, and the California School of Professional Psychology. She is an amazing, oh yes.
I'm sorry, Nathan, this is Jen. We are getting a lot of feedback on your audio on your end. I'm wondering if you can just double check that your computer speaker is not causing some feedback issues.
Sure.
It's really hard to understand you. I'm sorry. We're having a lot of people reporting back on that.
Well, let me check again. Apologies, everyone. Any better, or still get some feedback?
It seems a little better.
Well, you know what? I'll be really quick here because we'll let Claire get, and I'll hit mute. Again, as you can Claire's bio, I first ran into Claire through her amazing blog. Has a ton of followers. Hoping that those that aren't following her will follow her after today's presentation. And because of my audio issues, I will actually hand it over to Claire right now so we can jump into the good stuff. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you very much. I actually met your brother who came out to pitch me Stelter services when I was working at Jewish Family and Children's Services. So thank you. Thank you to both of you, and especially thank you to everyone for joining us here today. I'm really excited to talk about this issue because use of donor advised funds as a means for individuals to make philanthropic gifts continues to rise. And DAFs accounted for 12.7% of overall philanthropy in 2018, which is the last year I have the data for, compared with just 4.4% in 2010. So that's a huge increase. And the number of individual DAF accounts has increased more than 200% in the past 5 years. An ever broader group of Americans are embracing them as their approach to philanthropy because they want to approach it in a very thoughtful, strategic way, in a way that was once reserved only for mega donors who could afford to set up private foundations. So I really wanted to bring this to you today because it's a big bucket full of potential gifts for your charity, and the bucket's contents are growing. So you can see here that there's been a steady increase every year for the past 9 years. And we're not talking millions of dollars, we're talking billions of dollars. And this increase has been reported by all of the major repositories of donor advised fund gifts. The past 4 months have been extreme. March, April, May, June, the volume of grants increased an average of 69%. And the dollar value increased an average of 159% over the same time period in 2019. Now, of course, a lot of this is attributable to current events. But we were seeing increases even before the current crisis. And some of it is attributable to changes in the tax law in 2017, because there were a change in what you could deduct and how much you could deduct. And savvy donors figured out a way, which I'll cover later, that they could dump a lot of their giving into donor advised funds and get a better tax benefit. So the 2019-2020 fiscal year that ended June 30 saw a $1 increase in not death. Oh dear. I was dictating this to Jen this morning because I had updated the statistics, DAF distributions over the previous fiscal year. And National Philanthropic Trust reported a 54% increase, Vanguard a 44%, Fidelity 39%, Schwab 33%. So this is huge. And lest you worry, well, gee, okay, that's now, but I'm really worried about the economy. I'm worried we're going to go into depression. People aren't going to have that much money. And there is a University of Pennsylvania study that studied like 50 years and showed that grant making from DAFs tends to be particularly resilient during economic downturns. And that really makes them a really crucial source of rainy day funding for charities, which is really important. And I feel like too few charities are paying attention to this, which is why I built this webinar, because I just want to help you understand how they work and how they might be of benefit to your charity. And I think I want to try to explain why I think this strategy is so important by using an analogy to the game of Monopoly. So, you know, there's a free parking spot and you get all the money that's been left there by others who've had to park it there when they're assessed fees and fines. So a DAF is like that. It's money on the table. And today we're going to learn how you can land intentionally on free parking. And we're going to talk about why and how a DAF is like a parking lot. But first, I just want to launch a quick survey so I can get a sense of the knowledge in the room and how you are using or not using DAFs. So if you could just select one of these, you know, are you feeling like, what the heck is a DAF? Are you, we get DAF money, but we don't really seek it out. We have strategies to proactively seek DAF money, or we really rock it. We proactively seek it, we strategically cultivate, and we steward our DAF donors. And then Jen, as they come in, if you could let us know the results.
Yeah, sure. We have about 67% that have voted so far, and it's still going. So we'll leave it open for a couple more seconds so all of you can go ahead and get your choice in there. Don't be shy. Okay, we've reached about 80% and it's slowing down. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And here you go with the results.
Okay, so most of you know what they are. A lot looks like the lion's share don't seek it out. And some of you have strategies to seek it out, and 13% of you, yay, you are doing this very proactively. So good. We're going to learn how to seek it out today, and I think we're going to have something to help everybody. And first, I want to just say that there's two key objectives here for this webinar. You don't want to leave money on the table, and you want to offer the best service possible to your donor advised fund donors. No stone should be unturned in your quest for individual philanthropy. And just a little historical note, the first DAFs were created in the 1930s, and there was no regulatory recognition of them until the Tax Reform Act of 1969. And they didn't really begin to grow in popularity and visibility until the 1990s. So that is a reason why not every fundraising program has this built in as a distinct strategy as part of their fundraising. And today, they are philanthropy's fastest growing vehicle. The largest concentration of foundation money, you know, we're used to having a grant strategy to get foundation money, but the largest concentration of that money is now in corporate donor advised funds like Fidelity and Vanguard and Schwab that are all formed as 501c3 spin-offs of these financial institutions, as well as community foundations and other 501c3s. So when I worked at Jewish Family and Children's Services, I initiated and managed a donor advised fund. So there's lots of money on this table. And then once you get this money, you want to make sure that you serve those donors really well so they'll give to you again. So today's takeaways, as we are all sharing the beverage of our choice, is to learn what a DAF is not, who DAF donors are, and 6 common characteristics they share, 3 best ways to serve DAF donors, and 9 strategies to attract and leverage DAF philanthropy. So let's begin at the beginning. What is a donor advised fund? It's more or less a personal charitable savings account that's established by a donor with the sole purpose of supporting charities. So the donor has made the decision to be philanthropic with this money, but they've not yet decided which charity will be the recipient of their largesse. So the DAF acts as a sort of parking lot. And why might a donor want a parking lot? So we're going to cover 4 primary reasons. One is they have a windfall, and it might be an unanticipated bonus, the sale of a stake in a family business, lottery winnings, the vesting of stock options, and inheritance, something like that. They want to use this windfall for charity, but it's more than they want to give to any one charity this year. They can make an irrevocable contribution to a donor advised fund now, get all their tax benefits this year, and then the money that is parked there will grow tax-free, which will give them even more to give out later. And they don't have to go through the time and expense of setting up a private foundation, which tend to require larger investments, costly startup and maintenance costs. So there's a really low barrier to entry. And one of the biggest incentives is that they need a tax deduction this year. So now we get to the passage of the Tax Act of 2017, which made it so that fewer donors could itemize deductions unless they reached an amount that exceeded the standard deduction. With a windfall, the donor might have more to give out and they would exceed the limit. So what they can do with a donor advised fund is they can put a big amount and take a big deduction this year, putting it all into the donor advised fund, and then not contribute anything philanthropic the following year, take the standard deduction the following year, but they've got all this money in a philanthropic pot that they can use to make their contributions the following year. And this has been called bunching. So they bunch up all their philanthropic money and they put it all in, they get a large deduction, and then they can recommend distributions from the bunched money that's in their DAF over ensuing years that they don't make big gifts. They also can deduct up to 50% of adjusted gross income by giving to a public charity. And a donor advised fund is considered a public charity. It's a 501c3. As opposed to if they were giving to a foundation, they could only deduct up to 30% of AGI. Some people also want to avoid paying capital gains taxes on their windfall. So if they have appreciated assets, stocks, personal or real property, they want to get the full benefit of the fair market value of that asset when they make the gift, but they don't want to pay taxes on the growth. So let's say they had a beach house they purchased for $100,000 many years ago, and now they want to sell it, but it's appraised at $1 million. So if they sell it, they would pay taxes on the full $900,000 worth of appreciation. But if they donate it, they're going to get a deduction, $1 million deduction based on the full fair market value, and they don't have to pay taxes, and they've got all that money to give away for philanthropy. So if your charity doesn't accept non-cash gifts, most DAFs do. They don't all accept real estate, but many will if it's marketable, but they all accept stock, and the net proceeds from the sale go into the DAF, and they can recommend distributions, not just this year, but for as many years as they wish. And just as an example for you, Schwab Charitable reported that in the last 4 months, 64% of contributions to DAFs were non-cash assets, including stocks and privately held businesses. So if you're not set up to get that kind of money, know that if you're talking to a donor, you could ask them if they had considered setting up a donor advised fund. So the next thing is they want professional investment advisory services. So essentially, they're parking their windfall in a safe, prudent investment where they won't have to make the investment decisions. And again, the money grows tax-free because it's all eventually going to charitable purposes, so they can grant more to charity in the long run. And the administrator provides useful services like sending them one receipt that they can use for tax reporting purposes so they don't have to collect from multiple charities. They vet charities if the donor asks. They write all the checks. It's just one centralized place from which the donor can do all their charitable giving. And then the fourth reason related is they just like the convenience of a centralized evergreen philanthropic account. They want to make sure they're setting aside this money for philanthropic purposes so it doesn't get frittered away on something else. And again, so they don't have to worry about how it's invested. They like the convenience of doing everything from one place. They like being able to recommend distributions for as many years moving forward as they wish until their death or until the death of any named successors on their fund. So it gives people time to decide what charities they want to give to. Once they know that they've got some money that they want to use for that purpose. I mean, I was just talking to my sister yesterday, and she was saying, you know, I've got all this money that I'm not spending on shopping right now, and I think I want to use it for charity. And so, like, if you know that, you can plop that into your donor advised fund and then think about where it's going to go later. So there's multiple reasons why a donor might want to set up a donor advised fund. And I put them all together here for you on one slide. If you're taking notes, just know that you're going to get all the slides afterwards, and you can take more time to go over these. I don't want to go over this again right now in the interest of time, but I do want to take you back to the parking lot analogy for a moment, just to really cement this idea and reveal why more and more donors are using this philanthropic strategy, because the whole point of today's session is to get you to embrace the fact that this is a rich resource for you and one that merits its own fundraising strategy. So back to the parking lot. So everything is safe and protected here. It's your personal charitable savings account. The fees are very competitive. They're often lower than if they invested in them in their own account. Again, they avoid capital gains taxes and income taxes because it is an irrevocable gift. They don't have any control over the money once they put it into the DAF. but they can recommend distributions to specific charities. And most donor advised funds will follow that recommendation unless they discover that the charity that's recommended is not a viable charity or is under some kind of legal scrutiny. They can recommend successor trustees. So sometimes people will use this as a family giving vehicle and will say, you know, I want my children to also be on the fund. And then maybe when the children die, most don't go beyond one generation. A few do. And they can also keep adding to the fund. So it becomes like a mini foundation, but it has less regulations and no required minimum distribution at this point. You know, people keep trying to get this changed, but this is how it is right now. They have a donor advised fund administrator that can help them vet charities and write checks for them. And the donor can recommend recipients whenever. It's not just one time a year or anything like that. And so they don't have to write multiple checks. They don't have to visit multiple donation landing pages to spread their philanthropy. They just simply let the holder of the donor advised fund know who they want to give to, how much, and voila. So now we've covered what it is. Now I want to look into a little bit of who these donors are. So there's 6 common characteristics, and they're not the same people as the stereotypical foundation donor who might establish a multi-million-dollar repository for philanthropy. In fact, since donor advised funds are easy to establish and they have low overhead and they have no strict distribution requirements, a broad spectrum of donors participate. Minimums to establish a donor advised fund vary, but initial gifts of about $5,000 are very typical. And then later they can contribute smaller amounts. Fidelity reports that about 57%, so more than a majority of their donor advised funds have balances of less than $25,000. So you don't have to be a Bill Gates or a Rockefeller or whatever to set up a donor advised fund. So don't just think that, oh, well, we don't have any wealthy donors, so we probably don't have any DAF donors. That couldn't be further from the truth. So what really is common about a donor advised fund donor is that they don't give on a whim. They're very serious about philanthropy, and that's why they've set up this formal charitable distribution vehicle. They do want to make an impact today. Unlike private foundations, DAFs tend to give away money relatively quickly. And this is a common misconception that there's just all this money sitting there. But donor advised fund, about 38% of the money is gone within a year, and 74% is out within 5 years. So most donor advised funds are not set up to last beyond 2 generations, whereas many private foundations are set up as perpetuities, and they give out the bare minimum of 5% of assets a year. Nonprofits report that DAF gifts tend to be larger than their average gift. Vanguard reports that their average DAF gift is nearly $12,000. Fidelity reports that theirs is $4,200. So, you know, you do tend to get some good gifts from these people. DAF donors also have a high rate of volunteerism. And what's really great about that is that they're then seeing the needs firsthand. They're really gaining a perspective on how they can become a part of the solution. And this may be why grants tend to be larger. DAF donors have long-term thinking. They're taking a thoughtful, organized approach to their philanthropy. They will often be interested in collaborating with you in some way. They really care about demonstrated effectiveness. So this is important to know in terms of stewarding them moving forward. And then again, sometimes they really desire to engage their family members in giving decisions. So even if they don't set it up to pass to succeeding generations, many of these people sit down at the end of the year with their families to discuss their annual philanthropy and who they should give to. And again, usually other people can also contribute to the donor advised fund. So children might give to their parents' fund in honor of a special anniversary or other occasion. So how do you best serve these very special donors? So I'm going to read to you something from Stanford Social Innovation Review. DAF giving is rooted solidly in the donor's desire for greater impact, both in terms of maximizing financial resources for giving, but also for creating a more organized and thoughtful approach to philanthropy, including selecting which nonprofits and projects to fund. So there's three things that donor advised fund donors are looking at, and you see them here on the screen. And it's all about impact, the impact of the organization, the impact of their gift, and getting some insight into the root causes of problems. They know that they want to do something in the homeless area, and they're looking for organizations that address this and getting a sense of how they can help be a part of the solution. So you really want to put your impact out there. And then once the gift is made, you want to really validate your donor's decision to give to you by showing them that they made a really good decision. So let's look more closely at each of these three service areas. So you really want to show impact everywhere you can think of, because you need to show that you're DAF worthy, because these donors are serious. So this is really back to fundraising and nonprofit marketing fundamentals 101. Showing this impact on your website, on your blog, your e-newsletter, email, social media. Take a look at your website. If it's old-fashioned, if it's egocentric, if it's focused on just a bunch of facts and figures and processes, you're not going to impress these donors. You really want to share emotional success stories. You want to use videos, you want to use photos, you want to use testimonials, anything you can to specifically demonstrate your beneficial impact. And you want to make sure that everything is optimized for search. And talk to your webmaster or your IT people or your marketing people, because you want to make sure that if DAF donors are looking to help in your area of expertise, and they do a search, who's addressing homelessness, who's addressing human trafficking, who's addressing cancer research, that they find you, because DAF donors are in pursuit of what works. Okay, the next service area is just the same thing. It's you're telling what was accomplished. And again, remember, donor advised funds are parking money in this investment, and they don't just give to one charity. The typical Fidelity giving account donor has a portfolio of an average of 8 charities. And whether they recommend a grant to you of $10,000 a year or $10 million a year, they often decide based on a larger vision and goal of addressing needs in either maybe their local community or making a dent in a broader social problem. So for them to connect the dots in their giving portfolios wisely, they need feedback from the populations they seek to help. So this is an opportunity for you to really engage in ways that maybe your competitors aren't. So again, this is kind of fundraising 101, but you want to make sure that you send these people a warm thank you. I'm going to cover this more, but you want to give them stories of impact. You want to ask the donor for their feedback. You want to listen to them for any insights that they have on areas of need and challenges and opportunities. And just don't treat them differently just because the money came from a third party, an account. They're still just people like all of your other donors. And you want to provide testimonials from clients, from the people or the animals or whatever that the donors are seeking to help. And if you can't talk to the donor directly because they've chosen to remain anonymous, talk to the donor's administrator or send them a letter and ask them to share the feedback that you're providing. So that brings us to the opportunity to, let's go back, to meet with local donor-advised fund sponsor organizations. So you want to find out if you, let's say you have a local community foundation or a United Way or a Jewish Community Federation locally. They tend to all have donor-advised funds. Find out who oversees the donor-advised fund distribution recommendations. There is no centralized database to search for donor-advised funds, but there are networks of people who help donors establish them and who administer them. So one group are the people at the community foundations, and you want to reach out to them and just let your community foundation influencers know you exist. Meet with them. You can really kind of provide an invaluable service to them by offering on-the-ground insight into the root problems and the opportunities that donors have to make a difference. And often, once they know you, they will recommend you to their donors. The other thing is that reach out to your local community of financial advisors and estate planning attorneys, tax attorneys, and just let them know that you exist, because these people are also often looking for organizations like yours to recommend for charitable gifts. And this isn't even just for donor advised fund gifts. This is when people are leaving bequests in their wills and trusts as well. So it's really good to get out there and meet with these people, get on their radar, build a relationship, because these folks all influence millions of dollars of philanthropy. So let's look now at 9 strategies to attract and leverage donor advised fund philanthropy. So I'm not going to read over each one of these right now because we're going to go over them one by one. So the first is just become a sleuth. So do your donors have established DAFs, or where are your donors giving? So why don't you look at DAF donations to other organizations, either locally or within your field of operations, to get a sense of whether any of your supporters might have a DAF and they've given to other organizations through that DAF. Look also at annual reports from organizations that are traditional repositories of DAFs, such as all of these ones listed here: your local community foundation, United Way, Jewish Community Federation, and all of these bigger charitable operations. These are the biggest repositories today: Fidelity, Schwab, Vanguard, and Silicon Valley Community Foundation. The next strategy is just to look for hints as to what your donor is interested in. So pay attention to the types of causes your donors are supporting with their DAFs, and consider how you might tailor a philanthropic approach to them based on these interests. For example, maybe you're a comprehensive human services program and you noticed your donor supported a homeless shelter in your community through their DAF. Well, you have services that support homelessness, and not support homelessness, but support preventing homelessness. So meet with this donor to talk about the services your organization provides to address this specific problem. Or maybe you're an arts organization and you notice that your donor has supported high school scholarships, maybe at a school. But you can meet with them to talk about stipends that you provide for low-income high school students to attend your performances. Often donors are not aware of the full depth and breadth of what you do. The next strategy is to ask your donors if they have a donor advised fund. It can't hurt to ask, hey, do you have one? And might you want to make a distribution this year from your fund? They might have bunched their donations in 2018, for example, and there might still be a bunch of money in there that they've forgotten that's just waiting to be distributed. So, you know, it's kind of like money burning a hole in their pocket. It's just that they've forgotten. So you can offer them a painless way to give to you, and you might just end up with a larger gift than you'd otherwise have received just because you gave them a reminder. The next strategy is to follow clues. So you don't always know who gave you the donor advised fund gift because sometimes it's anonymous. So when you receive a gift recommended from a DAF, try to ascertain their identity because you want to steward them appropriately. And the checks are not coming directly from the donor, they're coming from the sponsoring organization. And they might not include their full name and contact information, but you can generally figure it out. Vanguard reports that really only 5% of their donors choose to remain anonymous. So sometimes if you just examine the accompanying paperwork that comes with the check, you'll find the answer. So it might not give you everything, but it might say made from the Gen Generosity Fund or recommended from the John Doe Memorial Fund. If Gen Generosity is your donor, or if John Doe's kids sit on your board, you know who the donor is. You can also look into your past history and see, do you have any past donor advised fund recommendations that are similar to the one that you've just received? Especially if someone regularly gives and they haven't given to you yet this year, to your knowledge, you can call them and say, hey, we got this gift, wondering if it's from you. And even if it wasn't from them, this acts as a good reminder that they haven't made their gift yet. So the next strategy is to promote the fact that you accept donor advised fund gifts. Donors know what you tell them, and people have a funny way of making assumptions. If you don't let them know you accept gifts from donor advised funds, or for that matter, gifts from IRAs or bequests, folks just won't think of you when it comes to making these types of philanthropic distributions. So you want to include all of this information prominently in all your fundraising and marketing materials to encourage donors to give through their DAFs. So here are some examples that I've pulled. The one on the left is from the International Rescue Committee, and you can say, you see, they just say, here's one way you can support, and just simply fill out the DAF direct form on this page and log into your account to make your grant recommendation. And then they do a nice little sales piece of what your grant will do. The one on the right is from Jewish Family and Children's Services, and you can see it's listed as a number of different ways that you can give. And then on the bottom lower left, give now from your donor advised fund, and you can click it and it becomes very easy. There are widgets that you can put on your site, which we'll get to in a moment when we talk about how you make it easy for folks to give to you this way. I just want to look at one more promo example. This is also from Jewish Family and Children's Services. And this is a donor advised fund donor profile. And what's really good about this is, if you've ever read Cialdini's 6 Principles of Influence, one of the 6 principles is social proof, and people follow other people. And so if you put other people up there and they can relate to these people and think, oh, these people seem just like me, or sometimes even I know these people. I can't tell you how many times as a development director, I got calls from people saying, oh, if Joe and Sally can do this, I can do this. I want to do what they did. So this is a really, really good tool. And you want to do this kind of thing everywhere that you can think of. Do it on your website, do it in your annual report, your newsletter, even social media. And one of the ways that I recommend seeing how other organizations do this well is to just Google other organizations like yours. Google universities and hospitals, because they tend to do a good job, not always, but sometimes. And take a look at these 3 organizations that I've put up here on the screen for you. So the next strategy is to provide comprehensive, up-to-date information to GuideStar Candid. This is really important. You really want to claim your nonprofit directory profile on GuideStar and make sure that you update this information every year. If this is something that your finance person does, talk to them and make sure that you've got a good sales piece up there, because many DAF sponsors will look at this and share this nonprofit profile information with their donors. And if they don't share it, they use it themselves to help their clients make more informed and strategic decisions. So for example, Vanguard reports that as they research charities for donor advised fund donors, they make more than 15,000 searches on GuideStar every single month. So it's a vastly underutilized resource by charities. Even if DAFs were not to exist at all, there's tens of millions of donors who search this resource. So you really want to put your best foot forward there. It's really the cheapest advertising around. I search it all the time. The next strategy is a huge one, and it's part of Fundraising Fundamentals 101, which is to steward your donors appropriately. So when you receive a donor advised fund gift, you should be entering it into your database as a gift from the donor. So it's from Vanguard, it's from the Community Foundation, it's from the Generosity Fund at Vanguard. But you want to make sure that you soft credit the donor in your database so you can build a record of their giving and treat them appropriately. And you want to send a timely thank you letter, not just a receipt, but a really thoughtful thank you letter directly to the donor. And then consider including this donor in your regular process for research, cultivation, solicitation. You know, maybe they're a major gift prospect at this point. You want to do that. And then don't fall into the trap of hesitating to contact the donor directly. And a lot of nonprofit staff do this because they mistakenly assume that because the donor set it up as a donor advised fund, they want to remain anonymous. They want to keep their distance. And some will, but remember it's less than 5%. So the letter that comes with the check typically includes their name and address. And you need to remember to cultivate and steward them like you would any other donor. And just saying thank you is the most important thing that you can do. Don't just thank Vanguard. Do thank Vanguard, however, because remember, the folks running these funds are also people. And if you build a positive relationship with them, they just may recommend you to other donors who are looking to enact the values that your organization enacts. As you're stewarding your donors, you don't want to confuse them. So these donors have already received a tax deduction for their giving. Don't confuse them or the IRS by intimating that they can double up on this. In other words, don't thank donors in your letter for their tax deductible gift. They already took the tax deduction when they gave to the DAF. So a good way to handle this is simply, thank you for your $250 gift made from your generosity fund. This gives a heads up to their accountant not to double up, on the deduction when they prepare their tax returns. And it doesn't get you into any hot water. Also, don't ask the DAF sponsor to let you know this gift fulfills the donor's pledge. Now, this used to be a complete no-no. Donor advised fund gifts could not fulfill pledges, and you had to be very careful to even mention this to your donor when you thanked them. You could never say this gift is in fulfillment of your pledge. The IRS has eased up on this a little bit, and you can use the language that thank you for this gift that fulfilled your intent to give to us. Because if you use the terms intent to give instead of pledge, it's not a legally binding commitment. But donor advised fund sponsors are still not allowed to put this into writing. So don't go back to them and say, oh, I need a letter that says that. And do not tell the donor that they will receive anything of value. So donor advised fund recommendations cannot be used to purchase a raffle ticket, an event ticket, an auction item. And something that has changed in recent years, when I was in this field, they allowed bifurcated payments. So you could say, well, the cost of the event ticket is $300, of which $150 is tax deductible. You can give us $150 from your donor advised fund. That's the tax deductible part, because you already put money into a tax deductible account. But the other $150 that's going to cover your dinner and dancing and everything, that needs to come from your private checking account. Okay, you can't do that anymore. So if you're still doing that, stop that. Mere attendance now is considered an incidental value by the IRS. So more common pitfalls, I guess, where stewardship can go awry is that your staff aren't trained on how to spot and appropriately enter DAF gifts in the database. So especially if you have turnover in staff, you want to make sure that these people know that when they get a gift from a donor advised fund, it's entered as a gift from the funder and soft credited to the donor. And also you want to make sure that when you are pulling reports for sending stewardship communications and appeals and things like that, that you include donors with soft credits. So if you pull a report of $100 plus donors, but don't include the donors with soft credits of $100 plus, you're going to grab the DAF sponsor, but not the donor. And soft credits are easily missed by a lot of CRM standard selects. So this is just something to make sure that you are on top of. And then you want to prioritize proactive engagement with DAF donors. I recommend sometimes considering DAF donors as a special segment for donor cultivation. You can ask DAF donors to participate in direct service volunteering because they're serious about their philanthropy. They often want to do it with their families. When I worked at the food bank, I used to bring in donor advised fund donors, grandparents, grandchildren, package up, beans and rice and food that we were going to distribute. At Jewish Family and Children's Services, I would have families come in and bring their kids and write up little greeting cards that would go in gift packages that we were distributing to seniors, for example. You can also ask staff donors to join your committees, and that's a great testing ground and pathway to board service. And again, it enables them to learn more about your impact. So that's just another tip for you. And you want to make giving to your DAF easy. So I pulled these examples from the University of Washington and Jewish Family and Children's Services. And what makes giving user friendly? So if you have Q&As, if you just have a big blurb up there that says, this is all the information that you need to make a gift, you can browse through the funds that you could give to here. If you have questions, call us here. Just make it easy. Here's another example. I'm running out of time, so I'm going a little quickly, but you can devote a whole web page to donor advised fund giving. This one is from St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And this is just a good example that comes right off of their ways to give menu. And then you can see, you can click on donor advised funds. They're circled in yellow. And when you click on that, you get to a landing page that gives you the option to learn more. That's big, bold, and in red. Or it says that you can write a check. It's got their mailing address. It's got a way that you can contact them online. It's got an 800 number. And there's really nothing else on the page that's competing for the donor's attention. And then when they click on the red button, they go to a page that basically has a compelling photo and a caption, really simple. All they have to do is grant now or learn more. And if they click on that red button, they've got information that makes it super easy to direct your gift to, if you have a donor advised fund set up at any of these places. It repeats all of the contact and tax ID information should they just want to write a check, or if they don't happen to have their money invested at one of these repositories. And even if you're not a big player in this space like St. Jude's, it may pay to consider upping your online giving game by moving into the digital age and setting up, installing a DAF Direct widget on your website. And Nathan mentioned the widget. I don't know, Nathan, if this is the one that you were talking about. This one is really standard. Nathan, is it?
Nathan actually dropped off the call. He was having audio problems, but
Okay.
Stelter we actually created our own widget, which is on all of our clients' plan giving websites, and then it's also available for other nonprofits to use for free. So.
Okay, well, that's really great to know. I mean, this one is also free. There's processing fees. People can make grants directly from wherever they're set up, if it's one of the ones that's on the widget. Or you can pay a little fee to put some other organizations up there, which is what St. Jude's did. And it's what you see here, where they've added American Endowment Foundation, ICO Charitable Foundation, Jewish Communal Fund, Raymond James Charitable, and Vanguard Charitable. And I would guess that's related to where the lion's share of their distributions are coming from. And you can put this widget lots of different places. You can put it on your emails, you can put it on your landing pages, your donation form. But really what you're after here is you just want your donors to go, oh yeah, I set up a DAF. I need to do something with this money. So bottom line, you don't want to turn a blind eye to donor advised fund support. You want to get really more systematic with your DAF promotion and your DAF donor cultivation. There's more and more and more of them. The number has increased every year, like by 60% from 2016 to 2017, and DAF grants are increasing by at least an average of 20% every year, and it's getting faster and faster. So I'd like you to consider this, you're prioritizing this pot of money. It's like you look at the whole philanthropic pie and you're used to thinking about gifts from individuals, gifts from foundations, gifts from businesses, gifts from special events, gifts from government. And then everybody forgets about gifts from donor advised funds, which is a kind of hidden thing. And even in the Giving USA report, they don't break this out. So it's hidden and there's a lot of money there. So if you make a plan to cultivate these donors, promote the fact that you accept DAF gifts, I think you're going to be really, really glad that you did this. So I want to thank you again for being here today, for doing the important work that you are doing to make our world a better, more caring place. Thank you, Stelter, for having me. And Jen, do we have any time for questions?
Actually, Claire, we are right at 2 o'clock and I do see some people dropping off. So let's just go ahead there. You got so many questions, I can't even tell you. So what I'll do is I'll compile those. I will provide them to Claire and you can, move forward with how you want to with those. But also for those of you still on the call, Claire has offered up her email address. So if you did want to reach out to her personally, it's on the screen right there. You can do that. You can also reach out to Nathan or myself if you have questions about the webinar or Stelter's products or services. And then finally, we recorded it. As long as it worked, we will put it on our website along with the handout. So both the handouts and the recording will be on our website at stelter.com/webinars, and I will have that up by Monday at the latest. I'll send an email out to all of you letting you know when it's there for sure. But if you just want to check out Monday, it'll be there for sure then. So that is it for me. I think, Claire, you just had a couple closing remarks and then we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, I just wanted to close with a quote from Maya Angelou, who said, "I have found that among its other benefits, giving liberates the soul of the giver." And I would just encourage you to work with donor advised fund donors and all donors for that matter to help liberate their souls, to thank them by name, to recognize them, communicate with them, make giving to you easy and liberating so you can take donors to a joyful place that gives their life a greater meaning. So go forth and prosper. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Claire. I really appreciate your time and talent. And thanks everyone for joining us today. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.